Thank you. I mean, I am proud of the things that you write about. And I will say, because I think as we get older, we realize that every choice in life as we move forward is one of versus embracing the ego or embracing the spirit. And the ego does have a task-oriented function, but if we drift into comparison, we always find ourselves kind of unhappy. And so I'm not ashamed of having you read that and listening to that, because I want other people to hear what I'm doing and just say, what is it that God wants me to do? What is it in my purpose that is unique and aligned with my particular gifts that I don't even have to think twice about? I know I'm good at it. I love it. And I can use it to really channel God's spirit, my spirit, the Holy Spirit, wherever you are spiritually, my greatest spiritual power to make the world a better place. Because all of us today, we are in a world war. We're in World War III. We are. World War III is a battle of the spirit. It's a battle of information. And all of us have to do something to make sure we stay sane and we stay together. 85% of the people in this country are very normal on both sides, right and left, are normal. They don't mind. They may not like it, but they don't mind paying taxes. They embrace hard work. They embrace making a contribution, and they embrace tolerance and are fully against racism. The other 15%, they can squabble and make a lot of noise, but we have to take our leadership role to just make sure that people, starting with ourselves, know we're okay. We are okay. We haven't changed. These are the things that will always be important.
Fantastic. So are you saying that what keeps you motivated has changed over the years?
Absolutely. I mean, I always felt, having parents, that my father was chief of station for the CIA in London when I was 9, 10, 11. And then in Germany, he was one of the top 2 people in Germany in 68, 69, when Russia invaded Czechoslovakia, for those that remember history. And my mother was, they both served in World War II. My mother was a senior intelligence officer who was sent in to document the death camps at the end of World War II, which was just shocks me to think about what that was like, and was actually sent to question Hitler's record keepers in Minden and Berlin right after the war. And so service was always there. And one of my passions, as you read in the Office of National Service, the idea was, whether it was H.W. Bush or Clinton, it was, how do we make it easier? You don't have to serve in the military to serve your community, to further the John F. Kennedy inaugural vision of asking not what your country can do for you, but what you can do. That transforms your life. You combine that with a sense of gratitude, and miracles and angels will be part of your daily experience every single day.
So how do we tap into that? How do we tap into gratitude and a willingness to serve?
Well, tapping into gratitude is sort of like, for an athlete, the best analogy is working out. How do I get in shape spiritually? How do I get in shape in terms of attitude if I don't first have clear goals, and if I don't regularly, with discipline, consistently show up and work out? In this case, it's every day. I jump in it's not going to be cold for much longer, but for the last 4 months, my pool has been very cold here. I don't heat it intentionally because I swim in my pool for 5 minutes, freezing cold, wakes me up, and then I meditate on what I have to be grateful for, and I grateful for my family, grateful for my friends, grateful for the life and the health that I have, whatever those things are. All of those things put us in a very different biochemical place in our brain that sustains where we're going. And so the idea of being intentional starts with being congruent in between words and actions. So if you're asking how to be grateful, think about the things you have to be grateful for. Maybe you had bad parents. Well, did you have someone that said, even though you don't have bad parents, I'm here for you? Did you have a great teacher that said, even though you don't get it, I'm going to stick with you to graduate, even though you're not good at math or science or English or whatever that might be? Did you have a mentor who said, every time you get back up, you're going to be okay, never give up? All of us have people in our lives that have helped us tap into our best selves. And so gratitude is a big part of it. Absolutely. And then service is part of that. It's saying, I know I can impact others. And that's truly not just service. It's our power. It's our divine power to make a difference.
And who were your mentors that helped shape you as a human being?
Well, I have been spoiled beyond recognition, starting with great parents. I mean, my parents were married for 57 years. They passed away. Let's see, they passed away 16 years ago. Gosh, it's hard to believe. And
time does go by fast.
Yeah. But my parents were wonderful. My dad, I didn't have the kind of father that, pushed me per se. He was in the stands. He was just there. And he knew I had that intrinsic motor, if you will. And my mother, she pushed me, but it was always with love. And so she embraced what she thought was going to be a son working in the United States Senate and going to law school, probably, with having an 18-year career in the NFL, where I happened to still be able to work half my off seasons in Washington as a legislative aide, as an aide to, Elizabeth Dole when she was Secretary of Transportation in 1983, working on shipping deregulation, working as an aide in the Office of National Service for HW and Clinton, or working in drug abuse policy at the time when the drug issue in this country was with crack cocaine was becoming very serious. And I was very interested in looking at the dichotomy between punishment, and treatment, and where there is a compassionate solution that holds people accountable, but also doesn't create a generation of people that really are just misguided briefly. So
now, when we started the podcast, you mentioned that we're at war.
We are.
There's a fear element to that.
Yes, there is.
What advice can you give to our listeners in terms of handling fear on a day-to-day basis, whether it's internal or the fear from when they turn on the TV or YouTube and all this stuff is coming at them about the war that we're in? Well, how do you overcome that? How do you
number one thing is I was a kicker in the NFL for 18 years. I was the most accurate kicker, and I was not initially that good. I was cut and rejected by 8 teams 11 times. And so there was the original fear that I had to overcome of being rejected, that was going to be the end of my dream. And then realize, well, the rejection is only a no temporarily. It's just one more chapter and one more challenge, one more lesson to learn. And so after 2 years, I went from being rejected to beating out the greatest kicker in the history of the game and breaking all of his records. Jan Stenerud, who'd been their Super Bowl champion, he was 67% lifetime. I was 80%. I finished with the most field goals, the longest field goals in Chiefs history. He still had the longest field goal in NFL history in the first quarter. All those wonderful records. And that required getting over that fear. So as FDR's wife would say, it's really the challenge to do the things we fear most that help us grow the most. So the more that you look at making as many mistakes as you can, as fast as you can, not intentionally, but just allowing yourself to do that, whether it's learning a language, which is one of my mentors, John Rassius. When you ask about mentors, John Rassius method, which is the number one, it's the only method that teaches all the Peace Corps volunteers all over the world, 350,000 plus since 1962, taught 42 languages in 3 weeks to go to anywhere in the world and have an impact for 2 years. 42 languages, 360,000 people, all learning it through one method. And that method turns the old paradigm of language learning on its head. It's you speak more in one class, your very first class, than you would normally in an entire semester. And so what happens in those first few weeks of classes? You make a million mistakes, but then you begin to realize that's how I'm going to learn faster. And I ended up learning French a lot faster. I wouldn't say I'm here we are all these years later completely fluent, but in 8 weeks I was able to go and live with a French family, and and that attitude of learning, you step back and think, well, it's language, but it's also communication. So fear is the ability to communicate, and the conversation with ourselves, and B, our interactions with everyone around us, managing our own expectations, and most importantly, fear is worrying about things we can't control. So the only person we can control, the only one, is ourselves.
It's ourselves.
And when we get clear about that, it transforms everything. So if you want to use the field goal analogy, I love to use it. I'm running on the field, and I had a moment of clarity, because you make it, and then there's another level, another fear, which is, what if this was just a one-hit wonder, 1 year of great kicking, and then I'll go back to all those rejections. So you have to challenge yourself. But I'm running on the field realizing that if I drew a circle or a square from where the ball was going to be kicked back to where I was beginning my approach, and in between where the my approach to the ball, that's my office. I have to control, and only can control that. I can't control the referees. I can't control the holder. I can anticipate the person catching the ball in the snap, but I just have to control this and this, the attitude. I can't control the people screaming. I can't control 20 feet away, 11 people paid millions of dollars to block my kick. So it became more and more clear to me, if I confidently not try to kill the ball, but attack the ball as focused as I can with as clear an idea of the target, then I will be even more successful. So Aisha, as an example, I became most accurate kicker in NFL history in 1984 at 76.4%. The previous record was 72%. And then when I realized that, as I was being told I was going to be getting older and worse, in my 10th season, I led the NFL in scoring. And from that point on in the 90s, I kicked at 87% for the next 3 seasons. I had 24 in a row, 21 in a row. I was 22 for 24 the next year, Pro Bowl every year, or All Pro every year. And it was because I'd simplified those fears into what my power was, which is to focus on what I can control. And obviously preparation is a big part of that. So there's a very long-winded answer to your question.
I was going to ask you, what strategies have you used to go from one level to the next? Because sometimes we get stuck and we forget to raise the bar to go to the next target.
Well, I think it's a very important balance, because we have to enjoy the moment and live in the moment, and not be a prisoner to achieving and then not giving ourselves a chance to embrace the gratitude and the joy of the moment of achievement, but also to keep challenging ourselves to grow. Well, once again, how are we growing? If we're growing in awareness and consciousness and spiritually growing, then the other things will have natural balance and proportion.
Agreed.
So that's a big part of it, because we know in weightlifting, for instance, we will hit plateaus. So we have to be more imaginative. I believe very strongly that creativity is a very broad notion of creativity. If we grow in terms of our creative expression, it's connected to, tangential to our spiritual self. And so when we stimulate our creativity, we grow spiritually as well, or vice versa. And creativity then opens up new doorways to look at things, to have a perspective on them from a different branch on our growth tree, if you will. And creativity also, literally, by definition, creates new opportunities as well. It may also connect us to other people, like here I am connected to you. Why? Because you and I connected through, I think, Bill Walsh and some other folks. And, we were creative in that social sense of meeting people, sticking out our hand, listening to what they had to say, having that funny thing called a real conversation, which is a disappearing act these days. So I look at creativity as unique to all of us. It's not necessarily poetry or painting or sculpture or singing or music. It is whatever stimulates that creative faucet that you see on the side of a house. If you see if that is coming out of this essence in your heart, and maybe those 40,000 specialized cells that God created in our heart that have to do with much more than just the brain and the intellectual side, but how it felt. And that's a big part of this alignment. The alignment is once again, our control is our alignment of our head, our intellectual side, creative side, with this spiritual side, this heart, these 40,000 specialized cells, because that can hold us back to a trauma of the great pain that was caused when we were, who knows, 2 years old, 1 year old,
Correct.
5 years
That
old.
so many people hold on to.
They hold on to, right? We hold on to it, and so it's holding us back. And so by doing that work here with the heart too, and seeing if those two can get aligned, suddenly we create new pathways, bridges around, through, and over those traumas to the growth that's ahead. And once again, to me, I'll just speak for myself, it is asking that question with more discipline, which is, God, what do you want from me? What do you want for me? How can I serve you? How can I have you work through me? We watched Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl talk about his faith and how that's made a difference. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to know that you're created and you have a life that may end at death or may not, but it's a gift. And seeing that helps us keep things in perspective and appreciate the moments more. So there you go.
Fantastic words of wisdom. Can you talk about some of the philanthropic projects you're working on these days, what we can expect from you?
Well, the most important one I do occasionally, and I'm actually talking this week to perhaps do a leadership training for the 21st year called Nation Building for Native Youth, which I developed at Harvard with a tribe in Oklahoma. But the main focus of my foundation, which was recognized at the Super Bowl at Lee Steinberg's party this year, right near my house, by the way, here in Scottsdale,
correct,
the Super Bowl was here, is called Champions for the Homeless. There has been an exponential growth in the homeless, especially the elderly homeless and the pediatric homeless, the child homeless. And these are vulnerable populations. And a judge just this week, in the last couple of days, ruled that they have to clear out this village of tents, a tent city of homeless people. Well, a very great percentage of those people, contrary to the rather limited coverage of the media these days on virtually anything with complexity, to be truthful.
Agreed.
And part of that is they just don't have money and they don't have resources, and that makes it much harder. But a great many of the homeless are not severely mentally ill and do not have severe substance issues. Many have minor degrees of that. But if you and I were on the street for a few months, I have a feeling we'd be kind of what I would call situationally mentally ill. We'd have had a lot of assaults to our senses, to our bodies, to living with very little shelter. So that's a challenge, and I'm hoping to work. I'm going to probably be going on television here in Phoenix next week to talk about it, because when a judge rules, because it's the law, the judge rules a certain way that we have to clear out these homeless, which, by the way, is not really in a residential area. What do they think's going to happen? Unfortunately, a lot of judges do not understand to look into and have a responsibility to look at the way that their ruling is made, such that the unintended consequences, which we hear that phrase a lot now, I didn't mean to do it. And now we're going to have more homeless spread out. And frankly, you're going to see them in neighborhoods where you didn't see them before, because they have nowhere to go. And St. Vincent de Paul that I work with, it's wonderful. We put a human face on the homeless. And we'll have our 62nd Champions for the Homeless. We do it on Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. This past year, we did it on July 25th and September 25th in the summer, when it's particularly hot here in Phoenix. And by putting a human face on the homeless, guess what happens? It's amazing when we look at people as people, when we look at people as human beings. It's amazing how much deeper we see, and it echoes them within us, which maybe, speaking of fear, we're afraid of. Because, oh my gosh, I couldn't be like that homeless person, but for the grace of God, go us as well. I mean, a huge portion of the population that loses their job and has a severe medical issue find themselves within a month, 2 months, homeless.
Right.
That's our world today. So I met so many wonderful people that with just unconditional love, even if they do have some mental illness, even if they do have drug addictions, or drinking issues. Who doesn't deserve love?
We all do. How can our listeners support you in your endeavors?
Well, thank you. If you go to www.nicklowery, Nicklowery, if you can put that on, I love it. nicklowery.org or nicklowery.com. You can donate there. You can see lots of videos that's been covered on Arizona Family Television, on CBS, and Good Morning Arizona, on Fox Television, on NBC, on ABC. We did a nice feature on us. 3 years ago, we made Phoenix the first city in the country to provide free COVID testing for the homeless. And so go there, see what we do, see if you'd like to donate, and perhaps join us. It'll be 9:30 on Easter Sunday. It's deliberately on those days, on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, on Easter, because we want the people that feel the most lonely, the most forgotten, to know that they're not forgotten. And I guarantee you that when you drive home or walk home, whatever it is from the event, when you're going home at maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock on Christmas Day or Thanksgiving or Easter, you're going to feel like that's what Easter should feel like. It's about rebirth. It's about redemption. It's about new life. That's what Thanksgiving should feel like. It's about being grateful and doing something about it, not just shoving turkey down our mouths and frankly watching a lot of football. Not that everybody does that. And same thing with Christmas. I mean, the beauty of Christmas to me is the birth of the King of unconditional love. And what is more unconditional love than being there and embracing people that you have nothing initially in common with, and letting them know, I see you, I hear you, I embrace you. Tell me your story.
Well, we all want to be heard.
Wonderful miracles.
That's really profound. We all want to be heard. I love that. Now, you've transformed so many lives throughout your career. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, I just, I sing how lucky I've been. I grew up next door to Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, not of Arizona, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Byron Whizzer White, who was best friends with Bobby and John Kennedy, became number 2 at the Justice Department, but happened a little earlier while he was a Rhodes Scholar and then at Yale Law School to lead the National Football League in rushing with the Detroit Lions, and before that with the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 years in the league, twice leading the league in rushing, and then happening to finish number 1 at Yale Law School. And that was my next door neighbor. And here he was in a time of such racial sensitivity. Here's a man, a Caucasian man who, working as chief of the U.S. Marshals, commandeered the school buses that protected the marshals going into Selma, Alabama, so they might be spared, violence. And then 16 years ago, maybe even longer, 2007, yeah, I think 17 years ago, a man named Muhammad Ali moved 2 doors down from me.
Wow.
And so I got to know him really quite well. I was, he has Parkinson's, and was the last non-family member at his 74th birthday party in his home in Cheney Estates, where we both lived then. And I got to witness one of Earth's angels. And that's probably for another podcast, but I've been very passionate, Aisha, that the more we surround ourselves with people that raise our game, the more we naturally do.
I say that all the time.
We have to make those hard choices. Tim Story is one of the great speakers on the planet, talks about that. We have to let go of people that are pulling us down. The way I look at it is, if we're worried that we're being inhumane, then the better analogy perhaps is that we leave the door ajar. We close the door, but it's ajar, and we then leave them alone, and the door can be pushed open again by a serious, consistent change in their behavior and their values. But we have to leave those people that suck our energy. Some people call them energy vampires. We have to leave those people behind and just magnetize ourselves to people that bring out our best, that we can learn from, and hopefully they can learn from us. And then we have a synergy, a natural growth environment, sort of like putting great fertilizer but this is good shit, so to speak. I know I'm using a bad word, but
Okay.
that makes such a difference, right? Because you
Yeah.
learn more. And Tony Robbins, I've gotten to know Tony Robbins over the years. I was on his infomercial for 12 years, way back from 1991 to 2003. And one of his things is surrounding ourselves with people that we learn from. I mean, that's a big deal.
Fantastic. Now we just have time for one more question, but
You
I'm
bet.
going to leave it open. Is there any advice that you want to give to our listeners as your last words before we wrap it up?
Well, I'm going to give you two of my favorite quotes. One you've heard many times, but never give up. Never give up. It's not a loss. If you don't give up, it's a learning chapter in your life. Never, 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 never give up. That's the first thing. And the second thing is something I wrote way back in 1991. And it goes like this. It's not the brightness of the spotlight on you. It's the intensity of the power and the beauty within you that is the ultimate measure of a human being.
Fantastic. And you just put a smile on my face and all my listeners' faces with that last words that you just said.
Thank you. My honor.
My honor as well, Nick. Thank you so, so much. And I look forward to having you back again on the show.
I love to. And thanks everybody out there. Find somebody. If we help one person every day, just one person, see what a difference that makes.